you have to figure out how to provide value. And I really believe in this concept of this value creation opportunity, because you can talk to all of the people who have cash and are interested in investing, but you have to give them something to put it into so that they can get a reasonable return. And they have a problem if they have cash at hand and they put it into a Quest or a similar self-directed IRA custodian. They have a problem. Like, they're not getting a yield, and they're paying high fees until they put it to work.
If you're a real estate investor and are wondering how to raise and leverage private money to make more profit on every deal, then you're in the right place. On Raising Private Money, we'll speak with new and seasoned investors to dissect their deals and extract the best tips and strategies to help you get the money, because the money comes first. Now here's your host, Jay Conner.
Welcome to another amazing episode of Raising Private Money. I'm Jay Conner, your host, also known as the Private Money Authority, and it's on this show that we talk about how to raise private money without even having to ask for money. Well, as you know, I have amazing guests that join me here on the show. I pick their brains as to how they raise private money. Well, my guest today, believe it or not, has raised over $30 million in private money so far. And back in 2015, he actually decided to leave his corporate job, the 9-to-5, hustle and bustle. And since that time, he has already he's already secured over 500 real estate deals. And since he started doing this, he's living his best life outside of that 9-to-5 corporate rat race. He also has a podcast. It's called The Wake Up Call. And there on the show, he features inspiring stories from industry professionals who've used owning and renting property to take control of their own lives, just like he has. He also shares tips, tricks, and valuable insights into all things financial. Well, in just a moment, you're going to meet my very special guest, Mr. Paul David Thompson, right after this. Well, hello there, Paul, and welcome to the show.
I got to say, that's about to be the best introduction I've ever had.
You think so? Well, you see, it's easy to do a good introduction when you got a great guest.
Thank you.
And yes, Paul, you and I go all the way back to Quest Trust events where we've met before. Yep. I love Quest Trust. If you're listening to the show right now, Quest Trust, in my opinion, has got the best, hands down, best customer service and service of any self-directed IRA company that I've worked with. I've got 47 private lenders, and those that are using their retirement funds, which are over half of them, to loan us money on our deals, they all got their accounts at Quest Trust because I recommended they go there. But Paul, you've raised over $30 million in private money, for goodness sakes. You're ahead of me, my friend. You're ahead of me. Of course, I wouldn't know what to do with $30 million. I got 47 private lenders, $8.5 million that I just rotate from, property to property to property on the funding of it. But it's been my experience, at least in my own personal experience, there was something, quote unquote, there was something that happened out of the blue, not by my design, not by my desire, that triggered me starting to raise private money. My first 6 years, I relied on local banks. That's all I knew to do. And then I lost my line of credit. I had to find a better, quicker way to fund my deals. I didn't know anything about private money, self-directed IRAs, or anything the first 6 years until I was forced into finding another alternative. What is your story? What is it that happened? Maybe you did it intentionally. I don't know. But what happened to where you started raising private money instead of using institutional money?
That's a really interesting question, because when I first started, I didn't have just a whole bunch of money to begin with. And I had a little bit. I had just enough to be dangerous. But I stumbled across this idea of doing the BRRR method, the buy, rehab, rent, refi, repeat, which is coined by BiggerPockets. And in 2015, when I started, the market was really ripe for doing that. So it was housing in the southeast where I live in Little Rock, Arkansas, was just very readily affordable. It was easy to find deals, and I found so many deals that I ran out of my own cash, and so I was in this mode of I just wanted to buy as many rental properties as I could because I wanted that to replace my day job, because I really wanted out of my day job. I wanted to kick the corporate job aside and be in control of my own time. And maybe we can go into that story as well. But I learned very quickly that when it comes to raising money, it really helps to dig your well before you're thirsty. And so I learned.
Now, wait a minute. You said dig your well before you're thirsty. So is that the same thing and means get the money raised first?
Yeah.
Let me tell you something, Paul. You are far, but don't lose your train of thought because I know you're on a roll, but you are far, there's not many of us around that actually dig our well before we're thirsty. You know what drives me stupid crazy, Paul? You know what drives me stupid crazy? And I know you've heard it like I've heard it 1,000 times. They'll get up there, the gurus will get up there on the platform and they'll say, quote unquote, "Oh, just get the deal under contract. The money will show up." You ever heard that?
Oh yeah, many times.
Yeah. And I want to go, where is the money going to show up? Is it just going to like rain out of clouds? You know, it drives me stupid. I was either a guest or hosting a podcast, Paul, not too long ago. And me and the other fellow, we were having this conversation. I said, "Tell me, why in the world do they teach that stupidity?" He says, "I can tell you why they teach that stupidity, because they're selling a course on how to find deals, and they ain't going to teach you nothing about raising money."
Right. Right.
Anyway, back to you, Paul. I'm sorry I interrupted you. Go ahead. So
you want to basically develop your relationships, and this is a relationship business. And so when you do get that deal under contract, it's so much easier to figure out how to actually build your capital stack on a single family or a commercial deal when you have people who are expecting the call, where you've already planted the seeds that, hey, this is the business I'm into. This is the kind of thing I'm doing. I don't have a deal right now, but when I do come across something, would you want to hear about it? And that's kind of usually the conversation that I have. I don't really raise money as I establish relationships.
Man, you and I align like perfectly.
Yeah.
Here on this podcast, we talk about raising millions of dollars without ever asking for money. And I do exactly what you just shared. I teach in my program. I put on what I call my teacher hat, right?
Okay.
I put on my teacher hat. All 47 of my private lenders never even heard of private money until I put on my teacher hat.
Right.
And told them the deal. And desperation's got a smell, right?
It does.
And so I never talk about a deal that I've got in that initial conversation. I do exactly what you just said. Establish the relationship as far as they're interested. And like you just said, I got a deal to fund. I don't call them up and ask them if they want to do the deal. That's the most stupid question I could ask them. I give them the great news phone call. I can now put your money to work. And you know what? If they've moved their retirement funds over to a self-directed IRA company, at my advice, they ain't making no money until I put their money to work. I'm ethically bound to use it. Anyway, I'm so glad you said that. Go ahead.
Yeah, we're on the same page, aren't we?
Like 100, maybe 1,000%.
Well, I'm sure we'll find something that we can argue about. So the story behind building one of these businesses, and I think this is the idea, is like we want to be in a business where we are buying assets and controlling assets. And most people's struggle with that is the first thing they say is, where am I going to find the money? And that's a reasonable question, because I don't have $30 million in my back pocket. I wasn't born into the Walton family. I was lower middle class, or working stiff, right? So you have to figure out how to provide value. And I really believe in this concept of this value creation opportunity, because you can talk to all of the people who have cash and are interested in investing, but you have to give them something to put it into so that they can get a reasonable return. And they have a problem if they have cash at hand and they put it into a Quest or a similar self-directed IRA custodian. They have a problem. Like, they're not getting a yield, and they're paying high fees until they put it to work.
Absolutely. And as I just said, particularly if we tell somebody about it, we're ethically bound. You better put that money to work. And of course, the quicker, the better. Now, you mentioned the BRRR method again, which is, you buy the property, renovate the property, rent the property, refinance the property with institutional money, cash out, rinse and repeat. How's that method working these days for you in this climate of higher institutional refinance rates?
You have to get incredible deals. Like, the only way it makes sense anymore is if you're just buying an asset at just ridiculously low discounts, right? So are high discounts, and you're getting just this deal, because when you're buying an asset that has a cap rate of 7% or less, and you're borrowing money at 7% or higher, the numbers don't work out. There's just no, like, especially when you're financing the whole thing, like, you just, it doesn't work, right? So you have to buy, you can pay high interest rates on the front end for a short term if you are really confident that you can create value in the asset to force appreciation, improve management, or do an improvement, or whatever your business model is, so that on the back end you can get into the institutional debt. You just got to be really careful that you're not buying into an asset and getting trapped into a short-term high rate interest that you can't get out of. Like, that's the risk with that strategy.
Right. Do you have a preferred strategy in today's market?
For me, I'm buying, it's commercial assets, but I love seller financing. And right now there is a huge transfer of wealth, the silver tsunami. We've heard about it. There are 10,000 baby boomers retiring every day. 19% of them own some sort of business. I don't know what percent of them own real estate, but a bunch of them do. And they need to transfer that asset to something, and they're ready to retire. And with the prevailing interest rates in today's market, the idea of having a seller financing conversation.
Interesting. Well, this is Raising Private Money podcast, but let's detour for a moment.
Okay.
Let's talk seller financing for a moment. How do you have a conversation with a seller? I mean, 30,000 foot view here, but what's that conversation sound like when you're talking to, of course, this is to get seller financing, you got to be talking to a for sale by owner. That's like the only place you're going to get it that I know of. What's that conversation sound like? How do you approach the subject? How do you talk in terms that a layman would understand that's never considered seller financing? And how do you make that offer of them carrying back a note appealing?
Well, it's very interesting. So a lot of these people that I'm talking to, they own small apartment complexes or storage facilities. They own an asset, and in the commercial space, you can get seller financing even through a listed property in a way that you can't with a single family. It's just a different conversation.
But to begin with, these are business owners.
They are.
This is not Mr. Homeowner or Miss Homeowner.
Correct. These are mom and pop landlords typically.
So you already got a different audience.
For sure.
Yeah.
Right.
So
they have an interesting problem, right? They're about ready to retire, or they are retiring, and they have cash flow, and they want their cash flow. They want the cash flow to live off of, but they don't want the work to manage it anymore. And so I'll talk to somebody who owns a 10, 12 unit apartment complex, and they'll want, kind of a fictitious number here. They'll want $2 million. And that's a little high for if I were to buy it all cash. And I'll say, I can get really close to that number of $2 million. If you would entertain taking payments, would that be something you'd be open to hearing more about? And they're like, well, what does that mean? And they'll even say, do you mean like seller financing? I was like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Are you familiar with how that works? And most of them have some idea, but they don't know the details. I said, well, you're enjoying the income from this property right now, but you're taking over all the hassle right now. You're taking on the hassle. How about I step in and take over the hassle, and I'll make you payments just like you do to your bank, but I'd much rather pay you interest than pay the bank interest. And I find that that's a good segue into having a conversation. I'm very, I don't say, hey, Mr. Seller, would you do a seller financing? I say, would you be open to the idea of taking payments? If I can get closer to your
Well, they understand that.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, they
They
understand.
do. It's more intuitive to them.
Payments.
Yeah. Right.
I love it. What kind of interest rate do you offer? Or do you let them tell you, or do you let them tell you?
5% or less.
Do you get them to, do you ever have a conversation with a seller and you just don't bring up interest, or do you always bring up interest?
I don't bring up interest until they do. And I find that most the investors that are open to this, their interest is not their primary consideration. The sale price is their primary consideration, and the amount of payments they're going to be receiving. Mm-hmm. That's more important to them than getting an 8, 9, 10% return like a lot of private money lenders would, because it's a different scenario.
Yeah. Do you make multiple offers, as in, I can pay you, if you want all cash, I'll pay you this. Mm-hmm. If you'll take payments, I'll pay you this.
Mm-hmm. I do what they call a 3-letter option of intent. And so I make 3 offers, and I used to do 1 cash, 1 principal only, 1 interest only. I've gotten to where now I don't even put the cash number out there anymore, because I'm just not interested in buying an asset right now that's not a seller financing situation. The market is ripe for it. It's the best strategy that I know of in the current cycle, the current market environment. And I can get way cheaper interest and work with a situation where there's often no bank financing at all.
You sort of get to make the rules.
Yeah. And all you got to do is
you and your seller, you're making the rules.
Right. Both sides have to agree. But yes, I'm not like, I don't have to wait for an appraisal. I don't have to get all the paperwork that's done. Like the paperwork that we do with the closing, with the seller financing, even when we have the second that's being held by private money, just like with private money lenders, you kind of make the rules because you two are working out the details, and you and your attorney are writing the paperwork. So I'm controlling the details, and the devils are in the details. And if a bank controls the situation, that paperwork is written to their benefit, not yours.
When I was borrowing money from the banks, they made the rules, as you said. Mm-hmm. And the traditional way to borrow the money is you go to Mr. or Ms. Banker and you get on your hands and knees and you put your hands underneath your chin and you go, please fund my deal, right? Mm-hmm. You're begging. I mean, mm-hmm. in this world of private money, we're not begging, chasing, persuading, trying to talk anybody into anything. The traditional way of borrowing money to fund a deal is you got to pull up your skirt and let the bankers see your personal assets and your financial statements and all that mess. Well, here in this world, there's no credit score that drives into this decision. Mm-hmm. There's no, as you said, appraisal. There's no application. When I'm talking to a new real estate investor that's never used private money, they'll say, well, tell me about the application process. I said, let me tell you about the application process. First of all, there isn't one. And number 2, you're already approved. It's like,
yeah.
It's like here's the approval process. Your lender wires the money to your closing agent. That's the approval process. Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. What a refreshing conversation to be having with you. So let's go back to it was 2015 mm-hmm. is when you were still in corporate. You left corporate. Mm-hmm. What happened? Something happened.
So I had what I call a wake-up call, and that's what I call my podcast. The wake-up call is most anybody who's gotten into this business or started their own entrepreneurial endeavor in some way, they had a moment where they were just fed up. They had some new information that just kind of changed their perspective, and kind of light bulb moment happened. For me in 2015, I think it was actually 2014 when I went on this trip, but it was the summer of 2014, and I went on a trip with my family, and we had a beach vacation. My kids were out of school. My wife's a stay-at-home mom. I had a day job. We were a single income family, but I was, an engineer, professional, making good money, white collar kind of job, good income, decent life. But the problem is if you don't go to work, you stop paying you. And I was at this beach vacation, and they offered up the place we were staying, said the people after you canceled, would you want to, in your family want to stay, we'll offer to you for half price. So I had the money. I worked for the internet service provider. So we like made the technology that allows what we're doing right now to stream this conversation happen. It was 2015. It's not, or 14. It wasn't like it was unheard of for people to work remote, even for a week. And none of my employees worked in my office in Little Rock. They were all remote. And I just had the freedom and flexibility, except for I needed to make sure my job was okay with it. So I called up my boss and said, "Hey, I've been with the company for a long time. I really wanted to take this vacation. I'm just going to work from the beach house next week. Everything be the same. I'll work my normal hours. All my employees are remote anyway. We got this opportunity. So I haven't been away like this for a long time. I really need this a week." It's like, oh no, we don't do that here. I expect your tail back in the office 8 o'clock Monday morning. Click. Not even a conversation. Not even, oh, well, what's going on? Like, well, I really want to make this work, but it just isn't a good fit for us right now. We're just like, we don't do that. Click.
Well, seems he or she sounds like a sensitive soul.
Yeah, you know, and I thought I was important.
What? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Now, what was your response to the click?
I was pissed. I was just like,
tell me how you really felt.
I was so irritated. I mean, I would, but what else? What was I to do? I mean, I was like, I told my wife, she understood, but she was frustrated. My kids were kind of resigned to their fate. And I had this kind of moment where I got in the car the next morning where I had to drive home because I just kind of tucked my tail between my legs and went back to work. I had to, right? And I wasn't in a situation where I could just say, you know, F off, you know, it's like, I needed that job. So I swore to myself that I would never be in that situation again. I would never ask permission from my work or my boss to spend time with my family. I was going to flip the script somehow where I was going to ask permission of my family to spend extra time at work. And it took me a while to build that, but that's when I said, I've got to figure out something. And after quite a bit of soul searching and some researching, I realized that real estate might be a path for that.
You didn't read Rich Dad Poor Dad, did you?
I have. You know what's funny is I read that before, and it did not have that moment that people have. I wish I had I wish it had of because I'd have started this earlier. That's really the only regret I have in this business is I didn't start earlier.
I got you. Now, so you love the BRRR method. In today's market, you got to buy them really, really at deep discounts, like you talked about. So. You hear sometimes people saying, well, I'm not so interested in being a landlord because I don't want to have to deal with tenants and toilets. I know you've heard that 1,000 times.
Yep.
And so how about share some tips on how to be a successful landlord to where you're running it and that business ain't running you?
So a whole big important lesson to realize when you get into business, and in this case, you know, real estate and being a landlord, is do you want to be an active business operator or do you want to be a passive owner of a business? And I realized that ultimately my end state was I wanted to be an investor, not a business operator. I'm fine being a business owner. And I'm fine being an investor, but I didn't want to always, forever and always be an employee in my own company. So I was very careful not to switch from being an employee for a corporation to being an employee in my own self-employed company where I was still trapped to a job. Right.
In other words, you didn't want to quit the corporate 9 to 5 and start working for yourself 9 to 9.
Right. Twice as much, probably making more, but eventually, like you need to set up, if you don't want to be the tenants and toilets, if you don't want to actively be in the weeds of managing your rental properties or any sort of business that you're in, every business has some sort of challenge. That's like saying Walmart, well, people steal from you, so I'm just not going to have a retail office. It makes, you know, every business has a challenge, and with tenants, you're going to have some challenges. Like owning real estate, requires responsibilities. So what you really want to invest in is business operations. And so that's what most people have a hard time learning how to do. They learn real estate very quickly, and they probably learn how to run their own business very quickly. What they don't learn how to do is to elevate themselves where they're the conductor of their business and not a musician in the play. So
how do you do that?
So you take a time audit of the work it takes, and you create a ways to like standard operating procedures of how to take care of things for you. So in my case, in the rental properties, I wanted to have a property manager. And people say, well, property managers never care about your stuff as much as you do. That's true. You probably will never find a property manager who is as good and cares as much about your stuff as you do. So therefore, you're just trapped to the shackles of being a landlord forever and always. And I know a ton of people, good friends of mine, they live that way every day. And they complain about it and they talk about the ups and downs. It's like you can just, sit there and complain about it, or you can create a system to replace that. And business operations fundamentally is all about creating systems. You hire employees to do operating procedure, and you have them do the job as good, or maybe 70% as good as you would if you were there yourself. And I really like to use Chick-fil-A as an example for this. If Chick-fil-A complained about the turnover of their employees so much, then they'd be just like McDonald's or Wendy's or whatever fast food joint you go through, that it's just kind of a crummy experience. Somehow Chick-fil-A is able to create a standard operating procedure where they train and turn over employees constantly. But yet your experience as a customer through a Chick-fil-A drive-through is far superior than anybody else out there. So you want to be the Chick-fil-A of the landlord business, where you're creating systems so that it's simple, repeatable, and you build a machine that scales.
So you answered the big question. That is, obviously, you're not managing yourself, the properties. You've got property management and et cetera. Mm-hmm. One thing that you talk a lot about on your podcast, Wake Up Call, you talk a lot about really designing the life that you want. In other words, leading a life by design, intentionally. Unfortunately, as you and I know, most people walking around are not leading a life by design. The tide is taking them wherever the tide takes them.
Yep.
I would say the first thing you got to fix to lead a life by design is you're not going to be leading a life by design with a victim mentality.
Right.
You got to have the victor mentality. But what is 101? What is lead life by design 101? How do you start? Most people I've discovered, Paul, they don't even know what they want.
Right. Yeah, that's the answer, actually. Yeah.
So what's the 101 lesson on how do you lead a life by design?
Start with the end in mind. What is it do you actually want? And that can be pretty deep when you really get into it. Like, what is the lifestyle? How do you want to spend your time? What is it that you really want to do? What do you feel like your purpose on this earth is? We're this awareness that's plugged into these earth suits walking around on earth. We don't know why we're here. We don't know what's going on. We're born naked and don't speak the language. And we're just trying to figure it all out. That's, I think, completely normal. It's the human condition. And then you get wrapped up into the economic forces and the socioeconomic powers that are, and you lead life by default. Like, you just follow the pattern that the people ahead of you gave you. And they probably meant well. Like, the people who raised you and the teachers at school, they did the best they could for you, like, given what they knew. And so now you need to do the best that you can do. And the best that you can do for yourself is to realize that you're the instrument of improvement. Like, if you want to make things better, then you have to invest in yourself and figure out what the possibilities are. And that's the kind of the wake up call for me. It's just like realizing with new information hits you, circumstances or reading a book or whatever, you're like, oh, things can be different. I have agency to create the environment and lifestyle that I want. And I get to define what's important to me, not society, not my family, not culture. I get to define what I want. And that really is the deep journaling exercises where you ask yourself why 7 layers deep. It gets super heavy really fast. But in that writing, you'll catch yourself, your ego popping up and realizing that your ego is trying to protect what you need to push that aside and like find your true self. And when you find that true self and figure out what they actually want, that awareness that is us and what they actually are here to do, and that you get to find that and you get to discover that on your own. And that discovery process then will find you the tactics of how to get the life you want.
Isn't it so liberating once someone realizes they can actually design a life that they want? I mean, how freeing, is that? It
Empowering.
reminds me, I'm sorry.
It's empowering, isn't it?
Empowering and powerful. It reminds me of Jack Canfield's book, which I absolutely love. It's called The Success Principles by Jack Canfield. There's 69 success principles in his book. And the very first one, which is the foundation for the other 68 success principles, is you must be 100% responsible for everything that happens in your life. I love his formula that I don't have time to share here on the show. But with that, I know, Paul, you work with business professionals that you consult with. You work with them on designing their life. You work with them on teaching them battle-tested, in the trenches stuff you've actually done in your business. How can people connect with you, learn about how they could learn from you, and continue this conversation?
The best place to find me is on my personal website, pauldavidthompson.com. And that's where you can get onto my newsletter. You can find out all my handles are there. Like I think we can go through them here if we want to, but they're long. They're all some version of Paul David Thompson. I have the curse of a common name, so I had to use all three of them. And so that's where I'd like for you to reach out and find me if you want to follow anything I've talked about here, if it's gotten your attention in any way.
If you're listening here to the show, go to www.pauldavidthompson.com. Of course, that will be in the show notes as well. Paul, final comments.
Yes, I would like to leave a final thought with everybody. You're here listening for a reason, and you're looking for something. You're looking for an answer to some sort of question. You're trying to figure out what to do, how to raise money, how to grow or scale your business. And there's something that is holding you back. There's some obstacle. There's some limitation. There's something you got to learn, and that's why you're here. And if I could give you anything to take away from here, is that anything that you find that is difficult right now, that is like the obstacle that you must overcome. Like whatever hinders your task becomes your task. And if you lean into the challenge of whatever it is you're facing, then like your life opens up and you will find a way to solve it. And the answers are here. Probably every answer to every question that you ever asked is here, but you may not be asking the right questions. So the quality of your life is the quality of your questions. And if you ask the right question, the answer will appear.
I love it. There's a writer downer, folks, right there. The quality of your life is based upon the quality of your questions. I love it. Paul, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
There you have it. Another amazing episode of Raising Private Money. I'm Jay Conner, your host, Private Money Authority. Thank you for joining us right here. Be sure and tune in next time for another episode of Raising Private Money, and we'll see you right here.
Are you feeling inspired by the knowledge you gained in this episode? Then head over to jconner.com/money guide. That's jconner.com/money guide and download your free guide that shares 7 reasons why private money will skyrocket your real estate investing business right now. Again, that's jconner.com/money guide to get your free guide. We'll see you next time on Raising Private Money with Jay Conner.